What's up, everybody? I'm Mr. J. This is W.A.D. MTG. It is a Tuesday evening, February 11th. I'm not particularly happy I have to do a video today, but the Commander bracket system came out today. So Gavin Verhey had an article this morning that he wrote, and he did a video on Good Morning Magic detailing the bracket system. Those of you who've been paying attention know that originally we were supposed to get this bracket system by Vegas last year, but there was too much going into what they wanted to do. They didn't have the new Commander advisory panel or whatever assembled, so they needed a lot of work to put in. They didn't really have the manpower. They wanted it to kind of sink in and have some time to kind of think about everything before they just regurgitated a list and made everybody follow it. But we have one now. We have a bracket system now. There isn't just 4 brackets, there's 5. 2 of them are kind of ignorable, so we're going to get into them real quick. With the first bracket, EDH bracket number 1 is basically just jank. So it's fairly ignorable because most people don't have a bracket level 1 deck. We're talking about really distinct themes here that don't have a distinct game plan. So like, let's say somebody's got like an all chairs deck where all the cards in the main deck or all the creatures or something have an art of a chair of some kind in the art, or like a Bob Ross deck where it's built around painting, it's got all the Bob Ross lands, and they just threw it together because they like Bob Ross, right? So these are decks that are just complete jank. They don't have a purpose really. Their only purpose really is to show off that you were able to come up with some jank theme and throw it all together. You're not trying to win the game. You ain't trying to do much. So let's go over real quick the core intrinsic values or whatever that make this a level 1 or bracket 1 deck. So it has no land denial or extra turn spells. Now this is below precon level, mind you. Below precon level is your jank. I think I called it exhibition or whatever. I'm just gonna call it jank because that's what it is. It's jank. It's not gonna work. It's not gonna win. It just is a thing, right? So no land denial, no extra turn spells. Now what is land denial? So it's like mass land destruction. It's cards like Blood Moon, cards like Stasis, cards like Winter Orb, things that are going to stop your opponent from producing resources, right? From producing land. So that's things that normally you won't see in a casual game anyway. Can't have it in level 1. So level 1 also has no 2-card infinite combos. They don't have to be game-winning combos, just 2-card infinite combos. They're not in a level 1. They also have no game changers, and I'm about to skip before I get into the other levels. We'll go right to the game changers because I'm trying to make this video quick. I had to take notes. I had to work today. I wasn't particularly happy about having to take notes and jot all this shit down just so I can regurgitate it, but I wanted to get the video out while it's fresh in everybody's minds so I could cover it and have my opinions out there on the subject. So no game changers and very few tutors. So we're going to get into the game changers real quick just before we go any further so it's not super confusing. So the game changers, a list of like 40 cards. They're missing some cards in my opinion, but they're cards that they were able to come up with that they said these cards are going to warp the fabric of the game. They're going to change the whole scope of the game in such a way that they're so powerful that you probably shouldn't run them in certain levels, and in other levels you should know how many of them you have because it changes the power of your deck, and in higher levels it really doesn't matter. So it's kind of like a pseudo ban list or a restricted list. Like back in the day they used to have banned and restricted, now they just kind of have banned. So it's kind of like a restricted list on CEDH for casual pods. Alright, so in white we've got several cards in white here. Drannith Magistrate makes it so where you can't play cards that are from exile or from like you can't play your commander, you can't play impulse draw cards, etc., etc. Enlightened Tutor, it's just a very efficient tutor in white. Sarah's Sanctum produces a buttload of mana. Smothering Tithe produces a buttload of mana. Trouble in Pairs draws a buttload of cards. So those are the cards in white that are on this pseudo band restricted Game Changers list. And you have to notice in every color that there's a few cards that are missing. So why isn't Teferi's Protection a game-changing card? You do have to pay 3 mana for it, but it gets around a lot of stuff. I feel like Teferi's Protection should be on the white list of game-changing cards. The other one that's it's like a gimme here. Why is this card not on here? Esper Sentinel. Esper Sentinel can go in every white deck. It's an amazing card. It's like Mystic Remora or Rhystic Study, but in white. It's one of the most efficient plays turn 1 you can do in the entire game of EDH. Esper Sentinel should be a game changer card, but it is not on there. Okay, so in blue, we've got, as you would assume, the most cards in blue, it seems like. So we got Cyclonic Rift, one-sided board wipe. It's high in the salt scale of cards. People don't particularly like seeing it. In a casual game, you really don't want to see a Cyc Rift. Expropriate, for like 9 mana, you basically win the game. It's chaining extra turns, because you can vote for, I forget how the card is worded, but it's basically for a permanent. If you're an opponent and someone plays it on you, you vote to give them one of your permanents, or you vote to give them an extra turn. So they're going to vote for an extra turn every single time, and they're going to get several free permanents. That's usually how it goes. Expropriate basically is a win the game button for 9 mana, and it's on the Game Changers list. Force of Will, free counter spell, counter anything. All you gotta do is pitch a card. You can do it with no mana. All you need is another blue card. So Fierce Guardianship, that's on the list of Game Changers. It's just another free counter spell. You can counter anything as long as your commander is out. Or maybe it's just, is Fierce Guardianship just instant sorcery? I don't remember. It's a free counter spell. You play it when your commander is out. I do think it can counter everything, but I'm not 100%. It might only counter instants and sorceries. Rhystic Study, that's a gimme here. Powers up every deck, can go in every blue deck. It really takes out from the different levels of decks, because when you build a blue deck, the first thing you're going to throw in is Rhystic Study. And if you have that in the deck, not only is the deck that much more annoying, but it's more on the edge of a high power CEDH card, so it makes perfect sense. Thassa's Oracle, same thing. It's more of a CEDH staple card where you're trying to Tainted Pact, you're trying to Demonic Consultation, you're trying to win the game with the Thassa's Oracle. There's other Thassa's Oracle lines where you can just real quickly, like a Hermit Druid, you don't got to know basics in your deck. You Hermit Druid into a Thassa's Oracle. There's several other things you can do there. Lines to Thassa's Oracle for instant win. It's just like the most efficient thing you can do in EDH or CEDH. Even in CEDH, it's the most efficient win con. So that makes perfect sense. Urza, Lord High Artificer, is on the Game Changer list in blue. It just allows you to produce a buttload of mana. In most Urza decks, you can't really play them at on a casual level. So it makes sense that it's a Game Changer card, because if you're running it as commander, your deck's got to at least be a 3, right? A 3 out of 5. It's got to at least be a 3. So Urza Lord High Artificer is on the Game Changer list. We got Mystical Tutor. It's a really efficient tutor in blue at instant speed. There's other cards that do the same thing for 1 mana, but they're sorcery speed. So Mystical Tutor is a Game Changer card. It's on the list. Jin-Gitaxias Core Augur. Now, it's more of a feels bad card. It's like everybody's #1 target to reanimate real quick. You pitch it in the bin, and then you reanimate it. You can do it as soon as turn 1, and have a Jin-Gitaxias Core Augur on the field, making sure your opponents, if they can't answer it right away, they got to pitch their entire hand, and it just locks them out of the game. It's a very high salt value card. It leads to a lot of feel bad games, especially if 1 or 2 people can't answer it and 1 person can. So it's basically becomes a 1v1 at that point, where the other 2 people are like innocent bystanders who just got forced into continuing to play a game where they have no resources, no cards, nothing on board, etc., etc. So before we get done with blue, I got to mention that notably Mana Drain is not on this list. You would think it would be, because and not only is it efficient counterspell, but it adds mana to your mana pool equal to the CMC of the card that you countered. Very high power tutor, but it is not on the list, notably. In black, our game changers is Bolas' Citadel. It's the first one. That makes a lot of sense to me, even though it's a high value, high mana value card where it costs 6 mana to get it out. There's a bunch of combos with Bolas' Citadel. It's very easy to combo it with it, and also even if it's just a value Bolas' Citadel, that you can get just an overwhelming amount of card advantage from Bolas' Citadel by paying life and just playing cards off the top of your library. Demonic Tutor, one of the most efficient tutors in all of Magic. In black, 2 mana, search for any card, add it right to your hand. There's other cards like it, but not many cards that do it just like it, right? So Demonic Tutor for 2 mana, very efficient tutor card, adds whatever you need to your hand, and it's a game changer card, right? So whatever you need to search for, whether it's a combo piece or a board wipe or whatever, it really adds to the efficiency of any deck that has black in it, and so it makes perfect sense that this card is on the list. Imperial Seal is real similar. For 1 mana, you search and you put the card on top, so you guarantee that the next card that you draw is the card that you want to draw for 1 mana in black. So it also makes sense that it's on this list because it's 1 mana, it's extremely efficient. But it doesn't add it right to your hand, but it does guarantee that you draw it. So Opposition Agent for 3 mana, it's flash. It makes it so where your opponents can't tutor and you take charge of their tutor. So it is a real sweaty card in EDH. You generally won't see it in any game other than a high power game or a CEDH game. If you're playing a casual game and someone's trying to jam an op agent, you should really question whether or not their deck is a casual deck or whether or not they're misrepresenting their deck and they're just trying to pub stomp. So that one's a perfect addition in my opinion. I don't have any issues with Opposition Agent. Tergrid, God of Fright, it's just a really, really high salt value commander where anytime they make you discard or sacrifice, they get whatever you discarded or sacrificed directly onto their field if it's a permanent card. You can't build a Tergrid that's like a 7. You can't do it. It's a high power deck no matter what you do. So it makes perfect sense to me that Tergrid is on this list as a game changer card. Vamp Tutor, so Vampiric Tutor is kind of like Imperial Seal. For 1 mana, search for a card, put it on top. You do have life loss there, but it's one of the most efficient things you can do in black, and it's basically between Demonic Tutor, Imperial Seal, and Vampiric Tutor. That like those tutors single-handedly give you a reason to run black in any deck, because it's going to make it efficient, especially if it's a combo deck. It's going to make it hyper efficient, so you're going to be able to do the same thing over and over and over again, no matter how many times you play a game with that deck. And the last card on the black game changers list is Ad Nauseam. Normally it's strictly seen as a CEDH card where you're trying to power draw through your whole deck, you're trying to turbo through it, you're trying to Dark Ritual into it, whatever you got to do, play fast mana rocks, fast mana, whatever you got to do to be able to resolve that Ad Nauseam as soon as possible, because your entire deck is built around Ad Nauseam. So you've got a very low mana value across your entire deck, and you're going to be able to draw like close to halfway through your deck and be able to work together and piece together a win right away. So it makes perfect sense. I'm a fan of all the black cards that made the game changer list, but I do have something to add here. There are a few cards that I feel like should be on here, or let's just talk about it real quick. So we got Demonic Council, which is the same thing as Demonic Tutor. For 2 mana, if you control a demon, search for any card, add it to your hand. If you don't control a demon, search for a demon. So it's essentially Demonic Tutor at home. But if Demonic Tutor is the card that is on the game changer list, you can just 1-for-1 swap it for Demonic Council. Just 1-for-1 swap. Super easy, especially if you're running several demons in the deck or your commander is a demon. So that allows you to just basically have a Demonic Tutor in your deck without having a game changer in your deck. And now we got Diabolic Intent. Same exact thing as Demonic Tutor. Search for any card, add it to your hand. 2 mana. It does have the caveat where you have to sacrifice a creature. That's part of its cost. But it's 2 mana, it's hyper efficient, and in most decks where you're trying to be hyper efficient in black, you're trying to run a critical mass of tutor spells. It's just a gimme card to add Diabolic Intent in your deck instead. And if you're trying to hover at like the 3 level or whatever, you just swap out Demonic Tutor for Diabolic Intent and Demonic Council. So you still have the tutor power. At 2 mana, you still have that tutor power without having a game changer card in the deck. And then the third example here is Grim Tutor. How much more powerful is Demonic Tutor than Grim Tutor? It literally is the exact same card, only it costs 1 less mana. So Grim Tutor costs 3 mana, 2 black and 1. Search for any card, add it to your hand. I do believe there's like a life loss there as well, where you lose 2 or 3 life or something like that. But in Commander game, where you have 40 life, that life cost, it's not really even a thing. You don't care about it. You just want to be able to search for whatever card you need so you can jam that out. Now, I will say for the bracket system that it does intrinsically either push you one way or the other. So let's say you have a deck that's like coming out as a 4 or whatever, and you want to play it at a little lower power, you can just 1-for-1 swap some of these cards. You got a Demonic Tutor, boom, 1-for-1 Demonic Council. You got an Imperial Seal or a Vamp Tutor, boom, Diabolic Intent, Grim Tutor. Just easy swaps. Makes your deck a little less efficient because you're spending a little bit more mana to get the desired effect that you're trying to get, but you're still getting that desired effect. And how much more powerful is it really to save 1 mana? When you look at most of these like high power and CDH lists, including my own, they not only will run the Demonic Tutor, Imp Seal, Vamp Tutor, they'll also be running Console, Diabolic Intent, and Grim Tutor, or a variation of all of those cards. So moving on from black, we'll get to green. Green, it seems like, was next to untouched. The only green cards, there's 3 of them. The only green cards on the list are Survival of the Fittest, Vorinclex Voice of Hunger, and Gaia's Cradle. Now, Gaia's Cradle is obvious. You should only see that in a very high power game or a CDH game. You're tapping, you're adding a mana for each creature you control. It's beyond ridiculous. It's super, super powerful. So if you're trying to jam that into a casual deck, you're a tryhard, right? You're a sweaty tryhard. There's no reason why you should be trying to pub stomp people with Gaia's Cradle in a casual pod. So Vorinclex, I actually do run Vorinclex, Voice of Hunger in a couple of decks, mainly my Hydra deck, and it does take resources from your opponent. So it doubles up your mana, and then it makes it so where when your opponent taps a land for mana, it doesn't untap during their next untap step. So it's resource denial, and because of that, it's also had a very high soul score for several years. So because of that, it's on the list. And Survival of the Fittest is just like the most efficient combo line tutor you can have in green. Now I believe it makes you sack a creature and maybe discard a creature. It might just be discard a creature for any creature that in your deck and add it to your hand. But it's essentially the same thing as the elf. I forget what the name of the elf is off the top of my head. There's an elf that you can just tap 1 mana and tap it, discard a creature and add a creature. So it's essentially the same thing, but I don't believe it is as smooth in your combo lines. So it might just sack a creature. I don't play it. It's one of those cards. It's like an older card. It's a couple $100. It's very expensive. I do believe it is also on the can't ever reprint this type list or whatever. So it made the list, but at the same time, so in green, it's just Survival of the Fittest, Vorinclex, Voice of Hunger, and Gaia's Cradle, right? But no Sylvan Tutor, no Worldly Tutor. Sylvan Tutor and Worldly Tutor are just 1 mana tutors. They're extremely efficient, puts a card on the top of your deck. They do the exact same thing as like an Imperial Seal or a Vampiric Tutor. It's only for creatures. But green can tutor whatever they want. It's not a big deal. It's completely fair. Why aren't these cards on this list, right? Why aren't they game changer cards? It seems like is a little bias there towards green, because in casual pods, green is like the most powerful color. But in high power and CEDH, green becomes like a mitigated color, where it's somewhere in the middle, towards the bottom, because the two most powerful colors in high power and CEDH are blue and black, right? Because you can tutor up everything and you can counter and interact for free. So that's just the way it is. In like CEDH, for example, green and red are arguably the lowest two, because white has got a bunch of tools recently. Now, while we're still on green, there's another form of tutor that green has access to that these cards were not on there at all. No mention of these cards. Green Sun Zenith, Court of Calling, Finale of Devastation. Now, all three of those cards allow you to search your deck for a creature card and put them directly into play, equal to the CMC with all of them. They're all X-drop cards where you pay like 1 for Green Sun, 2 for Finale of Devastation, 3 for Court of Calling, and X, and you can search your deck for any creature card or any green creature card and put them into play, directly into play, equal to X, which is their mana value. You will see all of those cards in so many lists, especially CEDH lists with Court of Calling and Finale of Devastation. Green Sun Zenith is a little more sparse, because I believe Green Sun Zenith only allows you to search for green creatures. I haven't played Finale enough to know exactly if it allows you to search for any creature, if it has to be green. I believe Court of Calling, it does have to be green, but I'm not 100%, so don't like check me on that one. If you do, you know, say something in the comments if you get a chance. Court of Calling, Finale, Devastation. So in red, there's only 2 cards in red that are game changer cards. They got Jessica's Will and Underworld Breach. These are CEDH staples. Underworld Breach is the second most efficient thing you can do in all of EDH to win a game. The combo lines are very smooth. They're very easy to pull off. And even if you're doing like a value Underworld Breach, if you've self-milled or discarded throughout the entire game, it is very easy just to cast the same spell over and over and over and over and over again a bunch of times to get an obscene amount of value. So there's really no such thing as a fair Underworld Breach. So Underworld Breach, Jessica's Will is on here. Only 2 cards in red. But how about Deflecting Swat? Why didn't they put Deflecting Swat on there? It's another one of those cards where if your commander's in play, you just get to cast this card for free. Now, if you don't have your commander in play, it's like a higher overcosted fork. So it's fair enough if you don't have a commander in play, but there's other cards that are more efficient at doing that if you don't have your commander in play. The idea is you're running low drop commanders to enable your free interaction. So I don't see a world where Deflecting Swat shouldn't be a game-changing card, but it's not. So we'll see how that goes from there. And so we're just going to try and power through the rest of this. This video is already getting too long. So in colorless, we got Ancient Tomb, fast mana. All right, Chrome Mox, fast mana. Makes perfect sense. Goes in CEDH. The One Ring, you can throw it in any deck. It's one of the best draw engines in all of EDH. It's one of the best draw engines in all of Magic, and it's quickly becoming one of the most prolific cards in all of Magic. So that makes perfect sense. Very, very powerful card. Tabernacle of Pendril Veil. That's one of those cards, you know, that's on the list of cards they can't ever reprint. It's a really old card. I'm not even sure exactly what it does. Never played the card. Don't really care. Trinisphere, it's a stacks piece. I'm not really sure why Trinisphere is on here, because you can play a Trinisphere and in a game where it doesn't really do anything or next to nothing. Depends on how your opponents have their decks built. So I'm not really particularly sure why Trinisphere found its way on this game changer list, but it's there nonetheless, because it can be very powerful, and you normally will only see it in a CEDH list, but it can be very, very powerful. Grim Monolith, that one makes sense. It's only 2 mana. It's extremely expensive. It's one of those like limited cards where you only should be seeing it in certain environments anyway. I could see having a Grim Monolith in high power but you normally won't see it anywhere but in high power or CDH. So moving on, Lion's Eye Diamond, fast mana, CDH staple. It's like $500-$600 card or something. You might be able to get a used copy for like $350, like lightly played or whatever. Discard your hand and make 3 mana. Certain decks, it's extremely powerful. The new Hashaton deck that just came out with Ether Drift, it's a super staple in that deck. It does just everything you want it to be able to do. But otherwise, you shouldn't be seeing that card if you're not playing CDH anyways. So Mox Diamond, another fast mana card. Mana Vault, another fast mana card. Some people put that in the ritual category because they just banned Crypt. But because they just banned Crypt and Crypt tanked in price, Mana Vault skyrocketed in price because people need to be able to produce that mana very quickly in the early turns so they can do their Turbo Adnos plan, or so they can get their 4 or 5 mana commander onto the battlefield, or so they can play a turn 1, turn 2, 1 ring or something like that, right? You really need to be able to turbo this mana to be able to land these powerful cards early to get the most effect out of them. And Glacial Chasm, which is just a highly abusable land. Like, so you can lock people out with Glacial Chasm, and any deck that you see Glacial Chasm in, you should be weary of going up against it, because you'll never see anybody put Glacial Chasm in a deck that they don't know how to abuse it, where they're not trying to abuse the hell out of Glacial Chasm to lock you out. So in multicolor, this is almost like a banned as commander, restricted as commander type of thing, where there's only 4 cards in multicolor, and that's Kinnan Bonder Prodigy, very high power commander. You shouldn't see him unless you're in a high power table or you're in a CDH table. Same is true for the other ones. Yuriko the Tiger Shadow, amazing commander. It's 2-color commander, just like Kinnan, that you should only really see in high power and CDH because it's just that good. You can't really build a fair Yuriko deck. You can't really build a fair casual Kinnan deck. It can't really be done. If you're building a deck like that, you're building it to take advantage, like massive advantage of their abilities. And so, you know, Yuriko avoids commander tax and ninjutsu's in, and Kinnan just creates a buttload of mana with all your mana rocks and all your mana dorks. So Winota Joiner Forces, similarly, it's a 2-color CEDH commander. It has been tier 1 over the years. I believe it's probably tier 2 now, but with the most recent bannings, it kind of bumped it up a notch because it is like a Staxy commander, right? So if you're given enough time to enable the Stax game plan, Winota can snowball, get out of control, and get around the stacks and keep throwing creatures into play and get around their own stacks. So just like all the others, there's not really a fair way or a casual way to build Winota. And the last one on the list is Grand Arbiter Augustine IV, which is another high power stacks commander. In my opinion, I think Grand Arbiter is the strongest stacks commander because it not only reduces all your white and blue spells, but it also increases the amount of mana that everybody has to play on all their spells. That's not you. So there's not really a fun way, a fair way, or a casual way to build any of those commanders. Now you can have them in the 99, but they're still game changer cards, so they're going to go against your list of game changer cards in your 99. So back to the bracket system in general. Now that we've established that 1 is jank, only like 4 or 5% of players even have decks that would fall into the 1 category. We can practically ignore it. We'll go right to the 2 category. They're calling that core, which basically means pre-con. Most pre-constructed decks that come out today are going to fall into this 2 category, and so is a lot of other decks, as long as you follow these restrictions. So like 1, it has no land denial, but there isn't, you can play extra turns, but you can't chain them. So in a level 2 deck, you can play a Time Warp or something like that, but you're only going to be able to have 1 in the deck because you can't chain extra turns and be like Time Warp into there's another 5-drop one, I forget what the other 5-drop one's called, or you can play like the 7-drop, there's multiple 7-drop ones, or the one that gives you 2 extra turns or whatever. You can only have like 1 extra turn spell in a power level 2 deck, because if you have more than that, then you can potentially chain them. Chain extra combats, chain extra turns. That's just something that's not seen in a casual setting. That's more of a high power thing to do. So you can have an extra turn, but you can't chain them. So you can only have like one per deck. Also, the same as 1, no 2-card infinites. That's not just a game-winning combo. That's 2 cards that make infinite creatures. That's 2 cards that make infinite mana. That's 2 cards that do something that would otherwise win you the game on your next turn, even if it doesn't win you the game now. So you create infinite mana with 2 cards. That's still a 2-card infinite combo. So you can't have it in a level 2. You can't have it, or it's not a level 2. Also the same as level 1, no game changers, and the same as level 1, a few tutors. So the only real difference here between a jank level 1 deck that you can just completely ignore and a level 2 deck, which is like pre-con level, is that you can have very few tutors in there, but they can't be game changers. No game changer cards. So if you're running tutors or whatever, just revert back to, okay, we're running Demonic Console, Diabolic Intent, Grim Tutor. Other tutors were like they're on creature cards or something that allow you to tutor for a specific thing, like that Enchantress is something Sun, Moon, Blessed or whatever, that allows you to search for an enchantment, or cards that allow you to search for an artifact equipment, or maybe even like the cards that allow you to search for artifacts. That recently they just in Ether Drift they just completed the last creature card that does that. That just allows you to search for I believe the 4 and the 5s. It's just a fat guy with horns that's got a guitar or whatever. So it'll allow you to play some cards like that, but not the game changer tutor cards. So just make sure they're really specific. So most decks, I believe, are going to fall into the 2, the 3, and the 4. So what 3 is, it's the upgraded tier, or the upgraded bracket. Just like before, we're going to try and keep it casual. 1, 2, and 3 is the casual power levels. They're the casual brackets. There's no land denial. So you're not using Armageddons. You're not using Blood Moons. You're not using the blue version of that, which is this Merfolk that is the same thing as something tied. Something tied tyrant or something like that. It's a merfolk that does the same thing as Blood Moon, only it turns all your opponents' non-basic lands into islands. So you won't be able to do that, or no like stasis or anything like that, right? So, and number 3, no land denial. So you won't also be able to play like your game changer, your Ingrain here, your Vorinclex Voice of Hunger. You won't be able to play that in tier 3 unless that's one of your game changers. So in tier 3, you are allowed 2-card combos late game. So if they're high mana value, if they're not low mana value, if it's gonna, we're talking like turn 6 and up. So if you can potentially do a combo before like turn 6, then you can't have it in the deck. But let's say you got a 4 mana card, a 5 mana card that can combo and win you the game. That's fine in level 3. That's fine as long as it's a late game 2-card combo. You can have 3-card combos as well. No restrictions on them because they're convoluted. It takes 3 cards to get there. Now I've got a deck. It's very high power and it runs 3 and 4-card combos like crazy. But there's so many different ways to get to them. Where that deck, even though I would call it an 8. In the past, now it's going to be a 4. It has won in CDH pods. I've gotten good hands. I've gotten my tutors be able to go through my deck, pull out the exact cards I need to combo off and combo off very early. So there are decks that are going to be able to run combos that are like 3-card combos or convoluted combos that are going to be higher power than 3. But in 3, you can have 2-card combos in a bracket 3, and you're allowed 3 of the game changers, 3 cards off that 40-card game changers list. So you can build, once you hit level 3, bracket 3, you can build a uber powerful deck. You just got to be really cognizant of exactly what cards you're going in that are going into the deck. So every slot, you got to really think about what cards are going into every slot. You can't have a Rhystic Study and a Demonic Tutor and you know, like a Smothering Tithe and Force of Will and all that in the same deck, because then that makes it a 4. You're limited to 3, just 3 of those cards. So however you want to do it, only three game changers in a bracket 3. So bracket 4 is the same thing it's always been. High power, everything goes. No restrictions. You can have as many game changers as you want. You throw whatever combos you want in there. It's high power EDH. You can do whatever you want. No restriction. Everybody knows by the time you sit down and you say this is going to be a high power game, that people are trying to win the game. They're not trying to dirtle. They're not trying to just play for fun. They're not trying to do some weird niche interaction. They're trying to win. So much like CEDH, the only real difference between Tier 4 and Tier 5 is that CEDH. So in Tier 5, which is CEDH, if you ever sit down and play CEDH, I'm fairly new to CEDH, but I do really, really like it as a format, and I do like the fact that the Rule 0 is completely, like, it's already accounted for. There's no point in talking about it. Everybody knows, no matter what you're doing, you're trying to win. At all costs, you're trying to win. And the deck is hyper-focused and tuned to specific meta. So that's the only difference between Tier 4 and Tier 5 here that they have, Bracket 4 and Bracket 5, is that in Bracket 4, you can do whatever you want, but you're not building that deck to go to a tournament, to try and take on a tournament, to try and take on a specific meta that's established and very successful, and that people know win all the time and are designed to win all the time as fast and efficient as possible, which you can still do these things, these really fast and efficient things like Thassa's Oracle combos, Underworld Breach lines, etc. You can still do those very powerful things in high power, but you're not building the deck specifically to compete against a certain meta, which you are doing in CDH. It's really the only difference is the mindset. Like a high power deck is probably still going to have like 37 lands or whatever, but you're still going to have all the tutors. You're going to have all your combo pieces. You might have, like less efficient combos where you're doing like the classic Exquisite Blood, Sanguine Bond, or you're doing, like Kiki Jiki lines. Some of those things are done in CDH, right? But what's the most efficient thing? In CDH, you're going to be running like 27, 28, 29 lands. Depending on the deck, some decks might run a little more, some decks might run a little less, and you're going to have all these, like every single fast mana piece you can have, and all these very, very specific interaction pieces to combat the certain meta. Where in high power, that's not necessarily the case. You can have a crazy deck that's got a bunch of combo lines that's, like 2-color, that's not like targeting a specific meta or specific different types of decks. And CDH, really, there's only so many cards that people are going to run that are acceptable really in CDH. If you're playing pet cards and things of that nature, that you can't really get away with that in CDH. You can try it, but your deck is going to be fringe and you're not going to win a lot. Where in high power, you can do whatever the hell you want. You want to throw on all these pet cards and stuff and still do all this other hyper efficient shit, then you can do that and get away with it and still win tons of games and have a great time, where you won't be able to get away with it in CDH. So that's really the difference there, is the mindset of going up against the meta, a certain tournament meta versus not, right? Like just high power table. So quickly, I do want to point out, now that I've covered all that shit, I'm not super happy. It's a Tuesday night. It's a random Tuesday night. I had to work today, right? I'm tired. I just got done eating. I still haven't had a chance to take a shower yet because I'm trying to take notes and do this shit for you guys. It's getting late. I got to be up early. But so real quick before I get out of here, I will say that there are ways to take advantage of this. At Chicago, MagicCon Chicago, it's coming up the end of the month. They're going to be debuting this. They're going to have it at different tables so you can sit down and play at the different levels. There are ways to take advantage of this. Like I was just talking to my buddy, he's got a very high power Eldrazi build, right? Where it's a super upgraded precon. But it's like, Commander Masters precon, where it's colorless under the dude that allows you to cascade. So he's got his very highly tuned and very highly upgraded, but it does have like an infinite mana combo in there. So he can literally take that infinite mana combo out I don't think it really has any of these cards that are considered game changers, right? And now all of a sudden his deck is a 2, and people are pulling out precons. Oh, I got this 2 that I might have put 2 or 3 cards in that I just got, or I just listen to this game night's upgrade guide, and I took out 10 cards and I put in 10 cards, and it's like a $150 deck, and it's playing pretty well. It's a 2, and he's like, oh, well, I'm gonna pull out this super high power deck, right? That's a 2, that technically is a 2, and I'm gonna pub stomp the shit out of you. So there are people, it's part of the thing that Gavin Verhey put out in his article, that there are ways to abuse this. This isn't an end all be all system. It's a guideline. It's a guideline meant for you to be able to sit down and tackle that Rule Zero conversation with a little more knowledge for beginners or for people who are playing with random people. It's not so you can play with your buddies and pub stomp your buddies that you always play with. They know what's in your deck. They know that how powerful the decks are. So it's not for that. It's for, you can go to your LGS, you can go to a MagicCon event, you can sit down and play with random people that you've never played with, that you don't know, and be able to say, look, I got a tier 1, a tier 2, a tier 3, or a tier 4 deck, or a CEDH deck, and that's where my deck fits in this bracket system. And we should be able to sit down with a pot of level 3s and play a fairly fun game where it's evenly matched and fair across the board. That's what it's for. It doesn't exist so you can take advantage of it. It doesn't exist so you can say, oh, I got this super highly tuned, high power deck. It sits at a 4, but it's only at a 4 because I got 4 game changer cards in it. So I'm going to take out this Ancient Tomb and put in this new whatever Raceway card that does basically the same thing as Ancient Tomb, as long as you can get to max speed. And now my deck is a level 3 because I only have 3 game changers in it, but my synergy is off the charts. So, it's really hard to police synergy, right? It's really hard for them to say, oh, well, you've got, this Joyra artifact build that can just storm off and storm off and storm off with all these 0 artifacts and drop everything in your deck and draw through half your deck and go for a win line from there. Excuse me. It's very hard to police that synergy. It's going to be more of a self-policing thing. So don't be a dickhead. Don't be one of these people that we have to be like, oh, well, you're trying to angle cut these rules and these lines so you can pub stomp the shit out of a bunch of precons. Don't do that. The opportunity is there for people to do that and take advantage of that. And people most certainly will try to take advantage of these different angles and these different gray areas. But just be a smart player, sit down and talk to the people you're playing with. And when someone comes in and tries to do this, recognize it. Maybe you can call them out on it and be like, hey man, like, you said this was a 2 and it's playing like a fucking 4. You're kind of a douchebag for that, right? Like, so do your best, guys. I'm all for this system. I really like this system. And the only one thing I want to add to it is that it's there for Wizards, right? Like, they put the system in place this way after they took control of Commander because of what happened after the bannings, so that way they could do this. This exists so that way they can unban a buttload of cards. That is their plan from a financial perspective, from a earnings level perspective. That is their plan. They do this so that way they can take a bunch of cards off the ban list and say, oh, well, now these cards aren't banned, but they're on the game changer list. So they should only really be seen in high power and CDH, or only seen very sparingly in casual. So that way they're not a problem, right? So that's how they're going to mitigate it. That's their plan. They're doing this so they can look at reprint equity and say, oh, well, we've got all these cards that we can print off the ban list or off the game changer list and put into this new product, or put as a special guest that's going to drive revenue up for the set, or the secret layer, or this commander precon, etc., etc. So if you think for a second they're not going to be like, oh, well, we're selling these special edition precons, the level 3s and level 4s, and now we're charging like $200+ for these. that's what you got to be prepared for. That's why they're doing this. That's why they set this up the way that they did. Not only because it helps players, but because it really helps them from a revenue standpoint. So they can look at these cards. They can look at every card that's not on the reserve list, right? That they can't reprint. And they can look at all these cards that they can reprint and turn that into revenue. To put it into a deck. So more people want to buy the deck. Take it off the ban list. So they can put it in a new product, etc., etc. That's my thoughts on the bracket list. I'm all for it. I'm a fan of it. I like how it is. I think it is going to work pretty well. At the same time, I do think there's going to be some douchebags that try to take advantage. Just try to mitigate that. Try and be smart players. Try and be friendly, but don't let these people just pup stomp you, right? Don't let these people take advantage of the rules. Like, oh, well, it's a 2. My deck's a 2. No, dude. If just like in the article that Gavin Verhey said, if you've got a deck that's technically a 2, but it plays at a 4 at a very high power, well, then play at level 3 and level 4. Don't try to be that guy that's like, oh, well, technically my deck is a 2 because I don't have no game changers, but I've got so much synergy in this deck that I can beat a CEDH deck with it. And be that guy that sits at the table and tries to pub stomp everybody. Technically, this will create multiple new metas where it's like people will do that. People absolutely will look for the strongest thing they can do in bracket 2, the strongest thing they can do in bracket 3 with just a couple game changers, and the strongest thing they can do in bracket 4 without it being CDH. People already do that, and they're absolutely going to take advantage of it now, but they're going to do so in a way that targets people who are trying to have like a pre-con level, upgraded pre-con level game where it should be fair across the board and go, 8, 9, 10, 11 turns, where people are going to jam pack all the shit in their deck, be like, my deck's a 2, but I can beat you turn 5. That's bullshit. And but other than that, other than the gray areas, I like the system. I think it's going to expand and evolve from here and become a more enjoyable thing. And I do believe that they're going to unban a bunch of shit, and they're going to take all them unbanned cards, stick them right on this game changer list, and we're going to have a lot of fun then. And that's it. That's all I've got. I'm Mr. J. This is W.A.D. MTG. I'm out, y'all. Peace.